Hello and welcome to Sportuccino's Fact or Fiction. I am Richard Parr. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope and at sportuccino.com. Every single Monday at 11 GMT, we discuss the big stories in sport, mainly the Premier League. If anything else tickles our fancy, we might bring that up as well. But we will have a list of some of the biggest subjects that have happened over the weekend, and then myself and our guest will decide whether they are fact or fiction. I am, of course, Richard Parr, and this is also an audio podcast. So if you're listening back to this on iTunes and Stitcher, thank you very much. So lots to cover on this Monday, but I've got a great guest for you. I'm delighted to say that joining me on the program today from Sofa Sports News, Harry Symeou is here. Harry, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
I'm good, thanks. It was okay. It wasn't, the snow limited what we could do, I suppose, but can't complain. It was a decent weekend of football. That's always a good thing.
Did you make a snowman?
I did not. I've decided that I didn't have any reason to go and feel freezing cold, so I prefer to stay inside and watch Super Sunday.
Exactly. There's certainly lots of football to talk about. And that's what you guys do at Sofa Sports News. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, Sofa Sports News is a football fan podcast. We've got a panel of various fans from different clubs. And as it's sort of developed and grown bigger, we've been able to get a few guests on, including a list of former Premier League professionals and some former Premier League referees. So yeah, it's growing and yeah, all good.
Fantastic. Well, at the end of the show, we'll let everyone know where they can continue to watch and follow everything that you guys get up to. But I think it's time to play fact or fiction. Let's get straight to it, Harry. As you mentioned, it was a huge weekend in the English Premier League on Super Sunday, Derby Day they were calling it. Manchester City defeating Manchester United 2-1. They're now 11 points clear. So, Harry, we are wanting to know, the Premier League title race is over. Fact or fiction?
I'm going to say fiction, probably to a lot of people's surprise, because look, we've seen bigger leads than that disappear in the past. I know this Manchester City side are looking formidable at the moment, but it only takes one bad result and then who knows, you could see them suffering just a little bit. If the gap closes to 6 points, 5 points, then you never know. So on that basis, just because it's December, just on that basis, I'm going to say that it is fiction.
Where do you think that defeat might be coming from, Harry?
Well, it could come anywhere. That's the beauty of the Premier League. It could come anywhere. We saw West Ham get a result the other day, which nobody sort of gave them a chance in hell prior to the game. So it can come anywhere in the Premier League, and that's the beauty of it. And that's what makes it so difficult to call.
Well, I agree with you. I think they will lose games. I think they can be beaten. I think defensively they're just not strong enough. I think 11 points, though, is a little bit too big. And I think when you look at what happened over the weekend, you saw matches where other potential title challengers should have been winning to stay in the hunt. Arsenal should have won at Southampton. In the end, they were lucky to get a point. Chelsea, on paper, should be beating West Ham 9 times out of 10. They lost 1-0. Yes, Spurs did win. Liverpool winning against Everton, ending up drawing 1-1. These were chances where, had City slipped up, they could have closed the gap a little bit. The fact that they failed didn't help them, and I just think 11 points is a little bit too far at the moment. And this City side are just so exciting going forward. All right, let's move on, Harry. We've been speaking about that Manchester derby, and of course there was a second derby on Sunday. It was between Liverpool and Everton, the Merseyside derby. It finished 1-1. Liverpool had taken the lead through a fantastic goal from Salah, but they conceded a penalty following a shove in the penalty area from Dejan Lovren, which Wayne Rooney was able to score. So he was able to make it 1-1 in a very one-sided game. But Jurgen Klopp didn't start Coutinho and he didn't start Firmino. So the statement here, Harry, is Jurgen Klopp got his team selection wrong for the Merseyside derby. Fact or fiction?
Again, I'm going to say fiction, and the reason I say this is because I think if you watch the game, you'd realise that Liverpool completely dominated the fixture in every way, and just because they didn't put their chances away is the reason that Everton have managed to claw their way back into this game, and a moment of madness that Jurgen Klopp cannot be held responsible for, in my opinion. I had something very similar to say about Arsene Wenger after the Manchester United match. There's only so much the manager can do. In my opinion, the lineup that Klopp picked was strong enough and should have won that game pretty comfortably. So I think it's a bit harsh to point the finger at Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm not sure whether it's fact or fiction. It's very easy in hindsight to say, oh, it's a fact because they didn't win the game. But I think, as you mentioned, watching it, they were much the better side. Sadio Mane actually didn't play in that 5-1 victory over Brighton last weekend, where Firmino, Coutinho and Salah, the three of them together, were absolutely awesome. No Mane. Mane, in my opinion, is probably Liverpool's best player. Maybe Salah is on form, but I think he's the one where if he plays, they normally win. And actually, they were 1-0 up. Mane goes through, had the chance. Had he passed it, squared it rather than shot, Liverpool would have been 2-0 up and it would have been game over. In the end, it's one of those things where I think Lovren just lost his composure, lost his cool, and perhaps it is fiction with Klopp, because effectively, if Liverpool had gone out and bought a decent central defender and sorted their defence out over the transfer window, perhaps they wouldn't even got into that predicament in the first place. So maybe it's not that he got his team selection wrong on this occasion. Maybe it's the fact that they haven't bought a decent defender in the first place.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right, Harry, let's move on. And we've already mentioned Arsenal a little bit. They drew 1-1 with Southampton. Charlie Austin gave the Saints the lead down at St Mary's, but Olivier Giroud came off the bench to equalise for Arsenal to make it 1-1. It is a full list of Premier League fixtures this week, and Arsenal face West Ham. So the statement is Olivier Giroud must start for Arsenal against West Ham. Fact or fiction, Harry?
Again, I'm going to say fiction. And the reason I say that, and being an Arsenal supporter myself, is because I feel like Olivier Giroud does have a far greater impact when he comes off the bench. And that's because he gives us a different option. He gives us a way of playing that perhaps is not what you'd associate with Arsene Wenger and the Arsenal way. He offers a completely different threat to Lacazette. But in an away game in particular, I'd like to see us play with a bit more pace up top. And that's why I wouldn't necessarily start him in that fixture. There's no doubt he's a great sub, great impact player. But I've always said this, Olivier Giroud is probably the best number 2 striker you will find. But maybe he's not good enough to start as our number 1 week in, week out.
Is there not some kind of way that Wenger could adjust things and play Giroud and Lacazette together?
Well, I guess there is. And the thing with Wenger is he's very adamant on sticking with a formation once he reverts to it. And if when he first came to the club, it was the 4-4-2, and that probably lasted about, God knows, 10 years before he changed it to the 4-2-3-1. And now he's changed to this sort of 3-5-2 or whatever you want to call it. And I don't see him changing things anytime soon. I expect him to continue in the same vein. Number 1, because he's stubborn. And number 2, because I just don't think we have the personnel defensively to sort of lighten ourselves in the midfield or in the defence.
Just quickly, as you mentioned, you are an Arsenal fan. January transfer window's coming up soon. Contracts running out for some of your key players. Are you going to keep hold of Ozil and Sanchez by the time of February?
I believe Arsenal will keep hold of them. Whether they keep them beyond the summer is a completely different story. But I do think we'll keep hold of them. I think Arsenal will give the top four a good push, despite a few disappointing results on the road this season. I expect us to compete for it, and I think we'll get back in the Champions League one way or the other, whether it be through the league or through the Europa League. So I expect Arsenal to hold on to them. And you know what? Maybe at the end of the season, if the two of them do leave, we may see Arsene Wenger leave as well, and a new manager can come in with a fresh set of ideas, transfer funds available, and can start building a new team.
Oh, that's a whole other Pandora's box. So Wenger out, who's in then?
Oh, God knows. It's a difficult one because you've got to look at availability at the time. In an ideal world, I'd like to see someone like Carlo Ancelotti come in, or maybe Diego Simeone. And I don't know if it's just because of all the years of watching Arsene Wenger's team, we've always lacked that still, that organisation, and perhaps that's something that those managers could bring in, and maybe that's what draws me to those two. But it's a difficult question, and I guess I'm not being paid millions of pounds a year to make that decision, so I'll leave it to the big wigs.
Not yet, Harry. Anyway, not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
All right, thanks for that. Let's move on, and we are going to talk about Leicester City. Leicester City. It was the Saturday night game at 5:30. And they were 3-2 winners up at St James's Park against Newcastle. A second goal in 2 games for Demarai Gray, the 21-year-old winger for Leicester, got their second. So the statement here is Demarai Gray must be called up to the next England squad. Fact or fiction, Harry?
I'm going to say fact, and I'm going to say fact because I just feel like England are so short of options at the moment. Demarai Gray's had a good time. He looks impressive the times that I've watched him. But I do feel as well that we've got to be careful here, because I feel like England are handing out caps at the moment like candy to all sorts of players. And we've seen some really, in my opinion, poor players get caps lately. But if you're going to give those players caps, then why not give one to Demarai Gray? He's quick, he's exciting, he's creative. I like the look of him, and maybe it's time to start bringing these players in and give them a chance. Maybe not for this World Cup, but looking ahead to the next European Championships, this experience may prove crucial for them.
Go on, Harry. Who's been the worst player to be capped recently?
Oh God, there's a few. I think, well, you got people like James Ward-Prowse. I know Cork got a call up. There's just so many players that you just look at and you think these are not the class and the standard of the players that England have had in the past, and maybe they're suffering from a bit of a lack of talent, just like sort of the Dutch national team are at the moment. It's difficult to say who's the worst, but there's certainly been a few that have made me raise my eyebrows anyway.
In some ways, though, Harry, you look at what the young England teams have done recently. The under-17s winning the World Cup. It's only a few years ago that they also won, I think, with who's the former Sunderland and it's Connor Wickham up front. Yeah. And there has been a real influx of really good English players winning these global tournaments. But is the problem the fact that they're not playing for the top 6? You know, you mentioned a handful of players there. Now, if your James Ward-Prowses and your Jack Corks and stuff were coming through at a Manchester, well, Jack Cork, for example, if he was given more of an opportunity at Chelsea, if a Loftus-Cheek was given more game time at a Chelsea, would we then be going, oh, actually, they play for a top 6 side, they are good, they're going to be a really good England player? Is it just the fact that they play for these lower league clubs and they're not getting the opportunity, or are we just being a bit deceived by some of these under-17, under-20 tournaments?
It's really difficult to say, because I'd be lying if I said I watched a lot of those tournaments. Obviously, I was following the results and stuff, but I wasn't watching sort of full games. What I will say is, I feel like with England, they're suffering from a lack of philosophy, and I don't think it's a problem that the likes of Loftus-Cheek are playing at Palace now, or Cork at Swansea, or Burnley, or wherever he is. I feel like the the country as a whole is suffering from a lack of footballing philosophy. And a good example of that is the Uruguay team, which I know for a fact what they do is they sort of focus on bringing through the young players. So the players that play in their under 18s, their under 21s, those players are groomed to play for the national team from day one. And that means they're going to understand the philosophy, play their specific way. And therefore, when they come into the team, they know what they're doing. They're not lost. Whereas in England, I feel like, of course, we've got a much stronger domestic league, and that's why we sort of lean towards the players playing at the higher end clubs. These players in the under 17s, under 18s, under 21s, great prospects, but they need to be playing football week in, week out. They need to be playing a decent standard. And I've got no issue with them playing in the Premier League, because even at the lower end clubs, you're playing to a good standard. You're playing against top players week in, week out. I think the problem comes when you look at the top teams and you think, do you know what, there's not many England players in that. But then from the club's perspective, if you're Chelsea, for example, and you can go and get a top Spanish winger for £20 million, or you're going to bring in someone from England who has that premium on top, it makes no business sense. Why would you do it? I mean, we've seen the likes of John Stones, who is a good player and will be a great centre-half in the future, in my opinion, but he's going for like £50 million. Raheem Sterling is only now showing his worth at £50 million. One that always comes to mind is Andy Carroll. I remember when Liverpool paid £35 million for him. Henderson went for a big fee as well. Now, these players, they can do a job, but they're not top class. And so the top clubs will always go abroad in search of these players because they're getting a much better deal.
They are indeed, Harry. Thank you for that. That was a really insightful analysis there. And we've got one more fact or fiction to do, Harry, before we discuss the Champions League draw, which is happening right now. Not going to give those away just yet. But let's just discuss our final point today, which is about Tottenham. Tottenham are the best side in London. Fact or fiction, Harry?
Fiction.
Is that because you can't stomach saying that, or you genuinely believe that? Who do you think is?
Well, at the moment, I think Chelsea are, because they're the champions and the league table doesn't lie, in my opinion. So Chelsea and Arsenal are both above Tottenham now in the Premier League table. So currently, I don't believe they're the best side in London. I think on their day they're as good as anybody, and they've got a great core of young English players coming through, which is fantastic. I just feel they lack that strength in depth, and we've seen, as they've sort of improved in the Champions League and got some big results there, we've seen their league form dip as a consequence. So my concern for Tottenham has always been a lack of strength in depth, a lack of options. Take the striker situation, for example. Harry Kane's fantastic. He has been for a few seasons now. But you look on the bench, does Fernando Llorente really scare you? He doesn't, in my opinion. I don't think he's better than Arsenal's second option, Olivier Giroud, or Chelsea have the capability of putting Pedro up there, or Batshuayi, or whatever. And so I just think their lack of quality and depth is what's holding them back from really pushing on. And of course, the stadium move has been a massive hindrance to them as well.
Albeit it was a good 5-1 victory for them on Saturday over Stoke. Harry Kane, 2 goals, and Son looking really quite good at the moment, in very good form. And he will need to be, Harry, because we are getting the latest from the Champions League draw from UEFA. And listen to this, Harry. It's going to be Tottenham facing Juventus. Last season's finalist. They've got to be gutted with that, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I actually cover Serie A for Sofa Sports News and for another couple of websites. So I've watched a lot of Juventus this season. And not only are they defensively solid, but they are formidable going forward. They got Higuain up there, Dybala, Cuadrado's fantastic as well. Douglas Costa. They've got so many brilliant players. They've got a really solid sort of base to play from, with Chiellini marshalling things at the back. it's a really difficult draw for Spurs. Really difficult, probably the worst one they could have got, maybe.
Juve aren't doing quite as well in the league as we've seen in previous seasons. Have they missed Bonucci at all?
It's a funny one because Bonucci, for me, was key for Juve. However, he's gone to Milan and his performances have come under a lot of criticism this season. He's not been the same player. I think Juve started slowly this season, but they've started to gain some momentum. They've picked up a few victories of late. They beat Napoli last week away from home, which was a massive result to sort of claw themselves back into the title race. They drew with Inter, the league leaders, at the weekend. And Napoli slipped up again this weekend. So it looks as though Juve are slowly sort of trudging back to the top. And it won't be long before they're back up there, in my opinion, and leading the way again.
Well, it's going to be Tottenham against Juventus. That's going to be absolutely fascinating. And there is another big game for one of the London sides. Chelsea have been drawn against Barcelona. What do you make of that, Harry?
Oh, it's Barcelona are not the force they were. So I do think Chelsea can get at them, but obviously it's that Messi factor. You know, any team that's got Lionel Messi in it can, on their day, turn you over. Barcelona have sort of established a decent lead at the top of La Liga this season, but it's more so down to the poor form of Real Madrid and their closest challengers at the moment are Valencia, who, again, I don't think have enough to go the distance. So I think the La Liga table is a bit deceiving at the moment. I don't think Barca are as strong as they have been in previous years. And there's certainly a different side under Valverde. They're a more, perhaps a more solid team. But the consequence of that is some of that flair sort of goes to the wayside.
And the rest of the English teams, I think they can be pretty happy about. You've got Manchester United have been drawn against Sevilla. You've got Liverpool facing Porto, and you've got Manchester City facing Basel. Do you think they'll be happy about them? Is there any one of those teams who might slip up against those opposition in the next round, Harry?
No, not in my opinion. I think they'll all cruise through. The only one I'd sort of worry a little bit for is maybe Liverpool, and not because Porto are a great side, but more so because you don't know what Liverpool's going to turn up. You know, you can get that. You can have the Liverpool side that turns up and puts 7 past you, or you can see the Liverpool side that are just a defensive nightmare. So Porto are no mugs. They're no mugs. That group that they were in with Besiktas and Monaco, I believe, proved to be a lot more close than most people thought at the beginning. They did get through in the end, obviously, and I just think they're no mugs, Porto. They could prove tough opponents, and if they get a decent result in Portugal, then you never know.
Well, it's Bayern Munich facing Besiktas and Shakhtar Donetsk facing Roma, and that leaves what is probably the standout fixture of the next round. It's going to be the champions Real Madrid facing Paris Saint-Germain. Harry, where is that going to go?
Oh, that is a really tough one to call. Really, really tough. I mean, I was saying about Real Madrid's league form, but in the Champions League, they've been fantastic. And, you know, yeah, they finished second in the group, but they have turned up in certain occasions. Maybe just those 2 games against Spurs where we didn't see the best of Real Madrid. Now, PSG for me are fantastic going forward, and most people have tipped them to win the thing this season. The only issue I have with PSG is that I feel like they're not challenged in their domestic division often enough, and perhaps that can go either way, I suppose. You can either look at it that, great, you know, we can get through our league games sort of the week before and the week after giving 70%, or you can look at it as how do you raise your game and get that competitive edge. It must be difficult when you're sort of playing against the standard of teams that they are playing every week. But who knows? That is a really tough one to call. That is definitely the standout tie. That's the one I'll be watching on whatever night that one is, without doubt. I enjoy seeing free-flowing attacking football, and both sides are going to give you that.
Yeah, it's going to be Ronaldo and Neymar on the same pitch. Of course, that's happened many times in La Liga with El Clasicos, but it's wow. I think that's going to be end-to-end action, and looking forward to that. Well, Harry, it's been really good to speak to you and learn from you. Really good to go through factual fiction and discuss what's been going on in the Champions League draw. Harry, give us a reminder of where we can watch and listen to Sofa Sports News and how we can continue to follow you on Twitter and anything else you'd like to promote, please.
Thank you. Sofa Sports News, you can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter is at Sofa Sports News _. Gutted, but I couldn't get it without the underscore, unfortunately. So that's how you can follow us. All our podcasts are available on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, the FNX network, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. And our shows are mostly on YouTube. The ones we record sort of via video call, they are on YouTube. We have a whole host of guests. We've got a few exciting interviews lined up for this week. We've got former referee Keith Hackett joining us tomorrow, and we've got former Manchester United striker Daniel Nardiello. Bit of a blast from the past. He'll be joining us as well this week. So that's how you can follow us, and that's it.
Daniel Nardiello, that's a bit of a football manager name for me there. And and Keith Hackett is a friend of Sportuccino as well. He dropped me a nice email the other day. He's a top guy, so you'll have lots of fun with him.
Fantastic.
Well, Harry, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for being on Sportuccino.
Thank you.